Hello and welcome to the Encephalitis podcast. My name is Prav Prathapan and I'm from Encephalitis International. Today, as part of Volunteer Week, we are shining a spotlight on one of our incredible volunteers, Evie Moore. Evie had anti-NMDAR encephalitis when she was just 19 years old in 2015. Today, she volunteers for Encephalitis International, supporting people in our Southwest group. And I think her story will really resonate with, particularly with teenagers and young people who have been affected by encephalitis. So, Evie, welcome to the Encephalitis podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing really well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, start us off, Evie. What's your story with encephalitis?
Yeah, so as you said, I was first diagnosed when I was 19 years old. And as like so many people with anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis, it started for me, the symptoms as a really bad flu. And I was very lethargic to the point that I was in my break times at work. I worked in an office at the time, and I was sleeping under the desk. I just felt a level of exhaustion that I had never felt before. So yes, I those were my symptoms, and I guess in the early stages, I remember feeling confused, lots of like really bad headaches, and I um, I went on essentially to have my first seizure. Um, Sorry, I'm just trying to recount, so I'll try and do this as best as I can. So I had the flu-like symptoms, falling asleep at work. I think probably my friends would have said that I wasn't myself, and I certainly didn't feel it. It felt like something wasn't quite right. And I phoned in sick to work on one day in particular, and I lived with my partner at the time in a flat, and I was obviously alone throughout that day. I don't have any recollection of what happened during the daytime. Um, and my partner came home from work, and I was expressing how poorly I felt, but he went out that evening. And thankfully, my mum had rang me and could sense that something was wrong, so she sent for my dad to come and collect me from home and take me back to my parents' home. And thank goodness they did, because that was where I then had my first seizure. Um, they remember me before the seizure happening being a bit like delusional, saying things that made very little sense. I was commenting on like the TV program that we were watching at the time, and yeah, my sister and my dad were with me at the time, and they were like looking at each other, thinking like, "What's going on here?" Um, and I think all of a sudden, my dad said that he like I was chewing my tongue, and I like started to froth at the mouth. It all seemed to have happened very quickly. It all unfolded in what seemed like no time at all. So obviously they called the ambulance, and the initial response, from what I'm told, was the paramedics were asking if I'd taken drugs, and that seemed to be something that was put forward a lot. And obviously my family, knowing me, was saying that this is not the case. Um, so I know my mum was then called home from work, and she joined me in the ambulance, and they had to use the defibrillator on me. And then I was obviously transferred to hospital. I was then put in an induced coma for 48 hours, um, to I guess protect the brain and try and put an end to the seizuring. Um, I've got very little recollection of that time. Um, and I think there were reports of like when I came back around again, there was more kind of hysteria, a bit of like delusion and not quite being myself. So at this point, medically, they couldn't really put a finger on it. And they were thinking perhaps epilepsy with the seizures. Um, And I was in hospital, I think, for a week at that point, and then was sent home with the guidance of, don't leave Evie alone in case there are to be more seizures, etc. So I went back to then obviously live with my partner at the time, and I don't know whether, because I was still functioning, it's really hard for that other person to perhaps see the severity of what happened and what could be about to unfold. So again, my memory's very hazy at this time, but I just have there's this distinct feeling of being like a complete fish out of water, like an element of like, wow, I'm out of hospital, but I don't know if I can do this. Like it's feeling difficult to just be existing and, getting dressed, being getting washed, eating was difficult. So fast forward, I guess, I think I was at home for a further week. That this was when really the delusions and the psychotic episodes were really starting to unearth themselves. So I do recall my partner's family coming round at that time, and I was starting to become very embarrassed because I realised I couldn't talk. Like I just being able to converse was a real struggle, and I still had the kind of enough clarity to think this is really alarming because this is someone I know and can usually talk to with no effort required, but I was really having to put a lot of effort into it. And I basically, what happened was one night I had a hallucination where I just couldn't sleep, and I was telling my partner that I really truly believed my mum had died. And obviously it was hugely distressing, and I was just trying to get across that I needed to see her and he needed to take me to see her because she was gone. And obviously that would have been hugely unsettling for him. And he said, I need to call an ambulance. And I do remember being on my knees and just begging him not to call it, because I was in this weird kind of in between where I had some logic in my brain and obviously knew I didn't want to return to hospital, but equally this complete belief that my mum had gone. So yes, the ambulance was called, and I then went on to spend just over 2.5 months in hospital. Yeah, they. I feel when I compare myself to other cases, I'm incredibly lucky that I got a diagnosis. I believe in the first couple of weeks, within that first month, because they did obviously multiple tests, so MRIs, lots of lumbar punctures, and then they did find the specific antibody, so the anti-NMDA receptor antibody. My family report, like the neurologist being like in good spirits about that, about like this is great, because we know what it is and we can kind of move forward. So that then gave my family some hope. But of those 2.5 months, I seem to be able to remember a fair bit of it, which after having so during my recovery, I then went and spoke to obviously a neuropsychiatrist and a neuropsychologist, and they had said that they found it interesting that I'd remembered so many of my hallucinations, for example, because in their experience, a lot of people will have like a complete mind blank for that time. So yeah, I just that is just it's such a it's really hard to be able to put into words, as I'm sure so many people who have survived encephalitis find, because it's otherworldly. It feels like, and this is why the Encephalitis International means so much to me, because it provides a space where so many people can understand each other on a level that is hugely powerful and healing. But I I just was in lots of psychosis during that time. I did a lot of I forget what the medical term is for that, but I was doing a lot of the repetitive movements initially. And my mum said that she remembered me being like in the hospital bed with my arms just in front of me for an hour, 2 hours of just like these, strange movements. And uh, just, I just remember a lot of fear at that time because the hallucinations being so vivid and real to me, and also the pain of seeing loved ones. And my auntie will say that they would sometimes get a text from me saying like, I can't wait to see you, and they'd be really excited to come and visit me, and then I would be hugely aggressive towards them, or not recognize who they were. So I feel for both sides, and I think that's the real cruel thing about encephalitis is obviously it doesn't just impact the person suffering from it, it's the families as well. It really does make me emotional when I think of the impact that that has, because I'm now a mum to two children, and thinking about what my parents had to witness, um, and the not knowing. I think that's another huge part, is that it's almost like your loved one is replaced. So that feeling of, will they return? And if they do, are they going to be the same? Must be so prevalent for so many families. And I really feel that must be just so difficult to navigate. Um, so yeah, I remember just lots of aggression, a real almost animosity. And my dad recalls coming to visit me and seeing like 1 minute I was fine, and then the next I was like shooting up the hospital bed as if like something was on the bed, and I was like terrified of it. And then I'm trying to like jump out the window, and I'm physically holding my family back. And my dad said like, I just couldn't believe the strength of you, Evie, because yeah, I was looking at the birds and I thought like, oh, I can fly, and I just wanted to get out there. um, And then I also had lots of hallucinations surrounding religion, which I found really interesting. So, yeah, just thinking that I was God, and that I said at one point to a junior doctor, like, he asked my name, and I was like, I'm Evie, and I'm a being that's been sent from another realm. Like, I'm, I'm, yeah. And obviously for the doctors, they would look at my family and be like, is this what Evie's normally like? And obviously they would say, no, no, not quite. Um, so yeah, just a real detachment from myself, I guess, and my identity, and no understanding of fear or danger. I tried escaping the hospital a couple of times. Um, yeah, so for my relationship at the time, obviously that was a huge strain. And yeah, it's difficult because although I lived with this person, it was a relationship that was happening. We were teenagers. I was 19 years old. um, but I think when you don't receive support from the other side, it's one thing to obviously realize that you can't be there for that person, but there was just lots of things that really made matters more painful, if I can put it that way. So there was one day where my partner came in, and at this point I'd started having the Ivy treatment. So I really note in the timeline of this happening that being a kind of turning point where I was starting to feel as though I was more part of the world and reality. And I actually brought to attention a few of the things that I'd heard, and said like, I don't think this can continue, you know? And he agreed. And there was, although that was hugely painful because you're kind of recovering from this huge illness, but also experiencing heartbreak, there was an element of relief because I think anyone who is experiencing that level of change within themselves, you question when you're able to, how could this possibly continue? You know, when I'm not who I once was. And as I've said before, like he said to me, like I just miss the old Evie, which was hugely painful to hear, especially when you feel like you're doing better, you know. And there has been times, you know, earlier on in my recovery where my parents had said, like, yeah, like yes, you are different, and that's a really hard pill to swallow sometimes. Um, Especially when, for me, looking back to before I had encephalitis, I don't necessarily have memory of who I was before. So you wonder, like, well, is it a good thing? Has there been good changes? Or, yeah, that it just really is difficult to build on your own self identity when you don't know who you were and you don't know who you are now. And I really feel that that's a huge issue for so many people who have experienced encephalitis. Um, yes, and I'm not sure where to go from there. Sorry, Prav.
No, no, not at all. Thank you so much, Evie. Thank you so much for sharing that. And one thing I want to ask is, you had a job at the time, and I was wondering, how did your professional
Mm.
life change?
So at the time, I was working full time in an office, and uh, there was lots of again in recovery. You obviously all of your relationships change. So all of my friends kind of it felt like they disappeared off the face of the earth, you know. And there were like conversations going on in work about like, oh, was it meningitis? And oh, perhaps you shouldn't have come in if it was something that could have been spread or viral. And so you feel sometimes a lack of empathy, a huge lack of understanding in general. So obviously at the point of I would say maybe 1 to 2 years post encephalitis, you have such a draw to, you know, return back to society and to what you considered as normal and what other people are doing at your age, that I did have a real need to and a desire to be earning money and be able to go back into the professional world. I did so by going into a part-time job, and that was, I think, 2.5, maybe 3 years up post encephalitis. And it felt amazing to be independent again, but equally, I was met time and time again with complete misunderstanding. So in the job that I was in, I had to remember a code for the safe, and obviously cognitively I was just not able to do it, and equally you couldn't write down the code. And there was lots of like, oh, Evie, you should probably get this by now, and like just no amendments to be made, or you know. And then again I would forget where things had been placed and things that I needed to remember. So my team at the time then would like hide them in another place to test me, which felt, you know, I can look back in hindsight now and think that's really cruel. And but at the time, you just think, oh, I'm being so silly. Like they're even wanting to test me because, you know, they can see that I'm not able to remember. It was almost like they wanted to catch me out, you know? So that's really difficult because it's hard anyway integrating back into that world without being met with unkindness essentially, and just an inability to really grasp what happened. Um, but obviously, I feel like there's definitely a wider understanding of encephalitis than there was even 10 years ago. I remember, for example, going to the doctors initially. So obviously, as so many of us do, I have struggled with depression and anxiety post encephalitis, and I went to the doctors about this, and I said I'd had encephalitis, and he then proceeded to go on Wikipedia and Google what encephalitis was. So that's just another element of like, oh, it just there's just so many layers to being misunderstood, and that's not necessarily to point blame at anyone, but just that there's, of course, huge work to be done in spreading awareness. So yeah, professionally for me, it's been difficult, and um, one of the more recent jobs I had that I found real peace in was with I've got a friend who owns a an ice cream shop, and that for me was amazing because I know my friend, we're close, and so she knows exactly what I've been through, and her mum have a real understanding of encephalitis, and the pressure is off, you know. So I felt like I was much more able to kind of, I don't know, get involved and be confident that I was able to carry out tasks. And if you forgot something or if you had struggled, you had a platform to be able to talk about it. And that's what I think everyone deserves in the workplace. Um, and yeah, so I now have two children, so I'm really lucky that I think in motherhood and being able to spend my time at home and focus on my children and having the privilege to have done that has just provided, you know, a sense of healing that I didn't know I was going to be able to accomplish. I think there's an element of, for me, when the encephalitis happened, I genuinely thought, I think it was obviously the time of life for me as well. It was a pivotal time of like 19 to 21, 22. And I was like, I just am not going to, this is not the life I thought I was going to live. You know, I didn't think a relationship would be possible. I didn't think I would ever return to work. It's, you know, I thought, you know, family and all of those things were not going to be for me. Which is why I really sit with such gratitude for all of the things that I've been able to achieve, you know, because I think from nearly losing your life, there was just always such a drive to have a family, and I think in some ways like an impulsiveness, because when you're at the point where I'd met my husband and you feel like you're getting this sense of life back, I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to grab everything while it's here, um, because this sense of, you know, how fragile life is and how quickly everything can change just has never left me. Um, but yeah, I'm in a space of my life that I would have never thought possible before, and I just hold such gratitude for that because, you know, all too often that's not the case for so many other people.
Thank you, Evie. And can I just say that story about your former colleagues was just awful, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And one of the other things you said was you didn't even know that it was possible to have that healing that was going to come. I think that was really profound. Thank you for that. Um, and yeah, before I move on to my volunteering question, I just want to know how are you feeling today?
Today, again, I'm filled with a lot of gratitude. I think my biggest challenges are mentally. So um, obviously that's one of, I think anyone who's experienced encephalitis, we will all say that because there's an invisibility to it so often, um, that is one of the biggest struggles. You know, you can function in so many other parts of life that people can almost forget that you're not able to do some of the other things, and that's something I'm coming to terms with more now, actually, further down the line. yeah, so I guess it's being kind to yourself. I'm just trying to manage my memory by copious lists and just doing whatever I can to try and manage my life better. I obviously parenting generally is a struggle. It's a huge privilege, but it can be hard. So I've also had times where I've thought, and this is perhaps like a bit of imposter syndrome, but like, is it a selfish thing for me to have done, to have brought children into the world when you're parenting with an acquired brain injury? And I think as I'm saying it out loud, I can really see that that's obviously just my own insecurities, and I think I do a good job, but those things can really get on top of you sometimes. Just with managing life, and the mental load of things really takes its toll sometimes. Um, but yeah, I think I also have just recently found freedom in driving. So I'd been trying to drive for on and off. I want to say maybe 6 years. So I've had lots of different driving instructors, and I managed with automatic to pass my test finally, and that has just been amazing. To have that freedom and to feel like I was able to conquer that. After trying so hard. Um, yeah, so I feel I just am always so thankful for the experience I've had, because it has given me a new perspective on life. And that's why volunteering means so much to me, because I think all of the people that are impacted, the people who have survived encephalitis, the people who have sadly lost their lives, the families, the loved ones that were impacted. I think about it on a daily basis, because how could I not? So yeah, that's why I'm just so passionate about working with the Encephalitis International, and I'm so thankful for them.
Amazing. And congratulations on the driving. That's
Thank
an
you.
incredible feat. Yeah, that brings me nicely to my next question, which is how did you come across Encephalitis International, and then how did you come to volunteer?
So actually, during my recovery, actually while I was in hospital, I remember my cousin had brought the charity to my attention, and truthfully speaking, I don't think I had taken advantage of the help that was available to me in the early days. Same to be said for my family. I think we could have really interacted more so with that, but as we all know, it is so overwhelming and all consuming that sometimes you become so you know tunnel vision on just getting better and getting through each day that yeah, in hindsight, I wish we could have turned to you a little bit more. But um, then as time was going on and I was having my own struggle through recovery, I was then obviously able to look up on my phone, watch videos, look at the articles that are available on the website. And I just had then seen about the volunteering. So um, I started volunteering initially. That was when my daughter was slightly younger. And yeah, I just absolutely loved the thought of um, just supporting people who had been through similar instances and can really see the value in that. Yeah.
Amazing. And talk us through some of the details of volunteering, because I think you're involved in one of our support groups as well, right?
Yeah, yes, that's right. So I run the Southwest support group, and we have a call every month. And it's just wonderful. It's a place that is so safe for people who have been impacted by encephalitis directly, or loved ones. And we sit there for an hour, and it is so powerful to sit amongst people who firstly know exactly what encephalitis is, um, and we just all have such a deep understanding that we we give each other the space to be able to be vulnerable, honest, answer questions if needed, or with the guidance of Encephalitis International. Um, it is, I think it's a lifeline to so many people. And I know that for me, just as the volunteer, I've been so deeply touched by people's stories and their ability to open up in those scenarios. Um, I feel like it's just a hugely cathartic thing to be doing, and it's it's a real honour to be able to sit amongst people who have had similar stories and journeys, and just provide understanding.
Amazing. Um, so yeah, I think we've basically come towards the end of the podcast, and I was just wondering, what advice or do you have for people who are perhaps quite young and are being affected by encephalitis? What would you say to them?
I mean, it's difficult to encounter encephalitis at any age, and I think the age in which you experience it comes with different challenges. For me, being in, the later end of my teens and then turning 21, 22, it felt like I was missing out on so much. I think it's really easy once you're back in the world, so to say, that you are really comparing yourself to all the other people your age, all of the things that they're doing, and feeling like you're completely 10 steps ahead. I know I did. And also feeling a sense of like life's over, and, having those feelings of finding purpose again. It is absolutely possible. And it's also really hard because it requires so much patience. But I think if you're able to, take advantage of some of the groups that the Encephalitis International hold, or just be able to talk one-on-one with someone who has gone through a similar experience, is is really life-changing, because you're met with understanding, a reciprocation that you don't find with someone of your age who hasn't experienced a life-changing illness. And also to remember that your life has taken a different course, and it's one of the hardest things to get your head around. But I remember the neuropsychiatrist said to me, like, Evie, you have been through more in your 19 years of life than some people will their entire lives. And it really struck me, because I was kind of comparing myself to these people who were just living as usual. And it's like, it's just really important to give yourself that time and space, and give yourself the love as well. I was just so rushful and desperate to be back in the game and back into, society, normality, whatever that looked like before. And I think it's about giving yourself that self-care and really acknowledging you have been through something humongous. And yeah, surround yourself with people who understand you, love you, and know you. And if you can seek help through Encephalitis International, we really are there to help.
Absolutely. Well, Evie, thank you so much. We've come to the end of the podcast, and I was just wondering, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to mention before we close?
I don't think so, Prav. I'm thinking I've probably mentioned everything. Um, yeah, just thank you so much for having me. It's been a really wonderful opportunity.
Well, Evie, you've been amazing. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It means so much to us and our community.
Thank you.
And yeah, that brings us to the end of the podcast. And I'd like to thank you, the audience, for listening and watching. If you have been affected by any of the issues raised wherever you live in the world, please contact our support services. Encephalitis International is here to help in whatever way we can to achieve our aim of ending death and disability from encephalitis. For all our information and support services, please visit encephalitis.info. And if you have found this podcast useful or interesting, please consider supporting our life-saving work by visiting encephalitis.info/donate. Thank you again, and see you next time on the Encephalitis podcast.